Hi everybody, thanks for sticking around for me. I'm with Mr. Artie Platt. I direct the Environmental Health and Safety Group, so I get involved in a lot of different situations involving OSHA, and I thought I'd start out with what I'm going to talk about first of all is preparing and participating in OSHA inspection, but what I thought I'd start out with is what not to do. I have a good example of a new client that I have that recently was inspected by OSHA, but what had happened is OSHA showed up at the door and nobody knew what to do. So what they had done is they had allowed the OSHA inspector to sit in the lobby for about a half an hour before basically telling this inspector that they couldn't come in. As you can imagine, the next day, the OSHA inspector showed up with a warrant and the county sheriff. Okay, and they were forced into the place, and as you can imagine, it was a kind of a nightmare for this company. It involved violations and penalties that were issued as a result of kind of mishandling just the initial walk-up for the inspector. And I'd handle it. And as I got to working with them, I kind of asked them, I said, well, what happened? And they basically told me there was just mass confusion. They didn't know who should handle the inspection, how it should be handled. There was no manager available to kind of make the decision to let the inspector in or to do it. So as you can imagine, it just caused havoc. They were eventually, these violations were published in the paper. So it came out in public, so it turned into a real nightmare. So I think it's just real important with a little kind of a ounce of prevention can prevent a big issue. So what gives OSHA the right? Well, as all of you know probably, the Occupational Safety and Health Act in 1970 basically authorized Congress to establish standards for safe work practices in the workplace, okay? And under that act, it basically allowed OSHA inspectors to come to your facility and inspect it, okay? There are a few caveats, you know, they can come at reasonable times. They can't come in the middle of the night. They have to come typically during normal work hours. Okay, they got to do it within reasonable limits. It's not going to be an inspection that can last multiple days. Typically, an inspection lasts at the most a day. You know, a lot of times it ends up being a half day. Okay, and it also allows them to talk to your employees. So as they're walking through your facility, they can actually go over and interview an employee that's working on a line, and you really can't stop them or allow them to do it, okay? So, you know, it kind of gives them free rein as they walk through your plant, you know, and you really can't do anything to stop it. You can attempt to stop it, but eventually they're going to get access to what they want, okay? Okay, like I said, you can refuse them entry, but it's just a bad practice and a bad idea. They will come back, and they'll come back with a vengeance. And you can almost guarantee that if you do that, there's going to be penalties and violations associated with the follow-up inspection, okay? Okay, when do they require full-scale inspections? There's kind of a couple different kinds of inspections. You know, a lot of times OSHA will come in under a specific agenda for a specific topic, say machine guarding or electrical safety, or they can basically come out and do a full facility inspection and look at every area: personal protective equipment, machine guarding, lockout tagout, electrical safety, fire prevention, and so on and so forth, okay? But when can they do these full-scale ones? Well, when they get an employee complaint. And I find a lot of times that's the #1 reason that when I get involved in it, an OSHA follow-up inspection and dealing with the agency, is there's been a complaint by an employee. A lot of times it's an employee that's been terminated, but that is a lot of times the #1 reason, okay? They also like to target high injury rate industries. A good example of those are like the steel industry, the steel pickling, metal benders, cutters and grinders, you know, chemical plants. You know, those are kind of high, you know, high hazard areas and areas to work in, so they will target those industrial sectors, okay? And then also they like to target people that have a lost day work rate above the national average, and I believe the national average is right around 1.6 right now. And what they do is you get those OSHA 300 logs, you fill out the form, and you kind of calculate a loss rate, and then they will kind of look into that, and if they see these higher loss rates, they'll come out and visit your plant, okay? And or if they haven't seen it in a couple of years. But that's a full-scale inspection, okay? So remember, it's not necessarily they're not gonna come in all the time and do this complete facility-wide inspection in all the areas. Mostly, it's targeted to a certain specific type of area of safety. Okay, well, what are the categories? Well, imminent danger, construction, chemicals, like I said, so the steel industry, okay? Secondly, if something is reported to a fatality or an injury is reported to OSHA, a lot of times you'll see them the next day, or if it's a fatality, a lot of times that same day they will show up to the facility, okay? Complaints and referrals, like I said, employees, neighbors, I've found that called on people, and other ones are program inspections. Just in the last few years, OSHA was targeting the lithographic printing industry, so I had a number of clients that received OSHA inspections for that. Okay, so they may pick it up. And another one I've been involved in is for flavor manufacturing. I think I was talking to somebody earlier, and they targeted the flavor industry, so they were showing up at plants within Illinois, that manufactured flavors based upon their SIC codes. So they'll pick different areas to come out and inspect you. What's your responsibility with regards to all these types of inspections? Well, of course, under the OSHA Act, you're required to provide a safe workplace free of hazards. Okay? You're required to provide training to the employees. You're required to keep all these records of training, injuries, illnesses. It's a lot of paperwork that you have to maintain. You're required to provide medical exams. A lot of times when you provide medical exams, it can be involved things such as using a respirator, or exposure to hazardous chemicals within the workplace. It could be audiometric testing for noise, levels, and seeing if there's no, loss, and there's stuff like that. Or if there's an injury, you're required to basically send them to the doctor and then maintain those medical records and provide them access to those records, okay? You cannot discriminate against anybody. So if somebody calls on your facility and it's one of your employees about an unsafe condition, you can't turn around and fire them for it, okay? A lot of times that's those employee calls or people calls are done anonymously, so nobody really knows who did it in the first place, okay? Basically, if you were to get a violation, you're required to post that information in the employee bulletin board and show them that you've done it, but you also have to post what your abatement or your corrective measures have been too, okay? So, and last but not least, you're required to provide and pay for personal protective equipment. Earplugs, safety glasses, gloves, sometimes even uniforms can be part of that, hard hats, okay? So, that's your responsibility. You want to provide a safe workplace. You've got to provide the training, you've got to maintain all your records, logs, OSHA 300 logs, injury reports, citations, corrective measures, and how they were all implemented. Okay, is there any questions on any of that? It's pretty straightforward.
That expanded in 2012 when they put the temporary worker initiative in place?
Yes.
Because if you're using temps, the temps now have to be trained exactly the same way as your employees, and
you are correct.
The website's got to document.
Yeah, and that's a kind of a sticky wicket when it comes to all these temporary employees, and I find it's very confusing for people.
That's one of their big citation issues right now, and it's one of their target areas.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
For PPE, what safety boots, you're required to provide your employees safe
Specialty.
Specialty is correct.
Specialty. Regular safety shoes or regular work shoes don't fall under what you have to pay for. If you require puncture-resistant soles, metatarsal guards, any of this kind of stuff, that's a specialty you got to buy. So it all goes back to your hazard assessment,
Which we'll talk about in a little while. Okay, well, as you can tell, you got all these issues. It's complex. You got to make sure you got all your paperwork covered. You got to make sure you got all your employees trained. So why is all this important? Well, because OSHA can knock on the door anytime, and there's no excuses. Ignorance is not an excuse for any of this stuff. So when you are prepared, well, what's it do? I find that a lot of times I'll get a call, OSHA's coming next week, can you come, and participate in the inspection? And then what I'll do is I'll come up beforehand and kind of start preparing for that meeting. So I found that what it does, it makes the meetings go a lot smoother. If they see that you're prepared, You know, they feel more confident in you, and you can just slide right through it a lot of times. And even minor infractions that they'll see at the plant that they'll kind of let pass a little bit and just point out to you and make sure you correct them and then kind of pass it on, okay? I think what it does, it allows you to control the inspection a little bit. You can kind of anticipate what the OSHA inspector needs. You can have it for him ready. You kind of preempt questions that he's going to have. And it does work. I do lots of inspections, same with the EPA stuff. And just having stuff handy and ready right there makes everything different and a lot smoother. And I think also it creates a positive attitude. You know, with the inspector, you're cooperating with him, you've got the records, they realize you take this stuff seriously. And that's important. When they don't think you take this stuff seriously, or this is just kind of a pain, that's when they start getting a little bit of attitude and start looking for stuff. Okay? And then fewer violations. I think that right there is kind of like the key that says for itself. You know, you're prepared, you're going to have fewer violations, fewer penalties, and fewer potential fines. Okay? Well, let's say OSHA shows up, like the one example that I first had at the beginning. Well, they were completely unprepared, confused, made the OSHA inspector wait, and eventually turned them away. Okay? But once they did get there, look, what are they going to do? First, he's going to, a lot of times they kind of mix it up on you a little bit sometimes. Some OSHA inspectors will want to sit and have a little opening meeting, which as I get to it later, I recommend that you start out that way. Other ones want to get right out in there and look at this target area that they're at to kind of catch you off guard, keep you a little unprepared, and see what it's really like in the first place, okay? They're, like I said, they're only going to take on the employees. So they may select a warehouse employee or a process line employee, a maintenance employee, and start interviewing them, quizzing them about your safety programs and what you do, what kind of training documentation you have. Are you aware of any injuries? Do they give you the stuff you need to do your job safely? They'll start quizzing those people. They're going to take a lot of photos too. They use photo documentation a lot in their inspections. Okay, if you're missing some hazard labeling or no confined space labeling, they're going to take pictures of it because they kind of got you when it comes to that, okay? Depending on the purpose of the inspection, they may come with an air pump and start monitoring your indoor air quality. You know, they can come with noise monitors and start measuring the noise levels. And I've seen them come out with both, kind of dueling up on you. Okay? And you know, sometimes you get these inspectors and they're aggressive. You know, other ones are not so, a little more cooperative, but sometimes you get a very aggressive inspector that is there with an agenda. You know, I've actually been told that by an inspector that he's not leaving without at least 3 violations. You know, so other people might have heard the same thing. And you know what? They're always going to get you. It could be something as simple as electrical cord or a grinder not being set up properly. You know, so, but what you want, if you're going to have that attitude, you want it to make it to be these minor citations, a grinder here or their electrical cord that's over there. You know, you want to make it to those, minimize those things, okay? They're going to want to review your records and programs. A lot of times I find, you know, when you have your written, you know, and I'll go through this a little bit later, you have certain programs that you have to be written. You know, your fire prevention, emergency, you know, planning and so on and so forth. But a lot of times those plans are out of date. You know, they're 5 years old, they're 7 years old, there's been process changes, personnel changes, the emergency contact information has changed. And what I always tell people is it's hard to keep that stuff. You got to rewrite it every time and it takes a lot of time. So I always tell people when you're doing that, you have a plan, there's a general template in the front. Okay, it talks about fire prevention and safety, and then you have appendices that you can interchange as things change in the plant. A new facility diagram, a change in the contact list. That way, when you're developing these programs, you're not rewriting the plan every time something changes at the plant. Okay? They're going to point out sometimes when you're on site, unsafe conditions. You know, that there's a machine guard missing over there. You know, there's you know, an electrical cord showing exposed wiring over there. There's a trip hazard over here. You know, and they're going to do it right there and kind of give you tips sometimes on how to correct them. Okay? Well, how can I prepare? The first and foremost, I always find a place, keep the place clean. Housekeeping, housekeeping, housekeeping. If an inspector comes into your plant and it's messy, they're going to expect your OSHA program to be messy too. Okay? It's as simple as, you know, keeping aisle spaces open. Okay? You know, a lot of times I go into places you can't even get through, aisle places, or the exits are blocked. You know, that's a big one. That's a big no-no. But that tells the agency right there that your other OSHA programs are probably not as good as they should be in the first place. Alrighty? Don't store flammable, combustible materials in your electrical equipment. I see this all the time. You know, paint cans next to the electrical boxes in the storage room, or the space heaters up in the corner, okay, where they're storing liquid flammable materials, or even cardboard next to where the heating units are hanging. You know, it's kind of crazy. You kind of see that stuff. Another thing is clean up your spills and leaks. I see so many times where there's stuff spilled on the floor. It's been there for days. I'll come back a week later. It's still sitting on the floor. You know, and again, you know, it could be solvents. It could be oils. It could be, you know, flavors. You know, for whatever it is. But you want to keep it up. I just find people get busy at work. They let this stuff slide. It builds up and it starts mounting up on you, and you just got to get ahead of it and stay on top of it. Okay, and then manage your raw materials. You know, open containers, improperly labeled containers. They walk around, they see this stuff. If they see a container right here full of something, a lot of times secondary containers are a big issue because it's tough to keep these labeled, especially when you're using solvents and paints, because it comes off. You know, but if they look or walk around and they see that you're not even labeling your containers, or they're open everywhere all over the plant, again, that leads them to start scrutinizing you a little bit deeper. And it's really easy to keep that container labeled or closed, you know, out of the way. Okay, just remember, I always tell people too, it's kind of a cultural thing. Like at your house, keeping your house clean. You know, you feel better about your house, you feel better about yourself. Well, you know what that is in the workplace too. I find that employees that work in a clean workplace are often happier, retain them longer, and they participate more in all your programs. Is there any questions with regards to that? It's pretty straightforward. A lot of this is common sense when you think about it. Okay, what else do you want to do? Create an inspection team, okay? You want a primary and secondary person to greet the inspector. Okay, typically that would be somebody in the management position or the management level, because you want to show the inspector that this is important to you. You're not going to send the maintenance guy out to greet the inspector and take him around. You need to show them that you take this seriously and this is very important, okay? That sends a real signal to them. It's always have a backup. Like this one place, like I said, when they showed up, there was mass panic. Nobody knew what to do. Nobody knew who to contact. They didn't have a primary or a backup person that could have handled this when they were there. Okay, and it turned out very messy. Okay, and then also identify who's going to participate in this inspection. Okay, like I said, a management, but you're going to want somebody that's going to walk around with a camera and take pictures, because the OSHA person is going to take pictures too. So you want to take the pictures that they take. Okay, and then you want somebody to control your documents, your written plans, your OSHA logs, and all that. You don't want 3 people handing the guy records. You know, you want one person that's designated to do that. You know, you don't want 3 people taking pictures everywhere, answering questions. You know, you got your lead and then you got your backup people. Okay, it's very easy, you know, with regards to that. Okay, know where your documentation is. This is one of the biggest ones. Last week, I had a client where OSHA had showed up, and it was kind of a perfect storm. The EHS manager was gone, the facilities manager was gone, the owner of the company was gone, and OSHA showed up, and all they simply asked for was a copy of the 300 log and to see the written programs. Nobody knew where they were. And it was like a chicken running around with its head cut off. Confusion. Well, they called me, and I knew where they were, so I just drove over there. I walked in, I pulled the files, handed them to the inspector, and they were satisfied. But it was just the whole confusion and lack of understanding where stuff is maintained on file is critical, okay? So know where the files are. Keep them in a central location. I don't know if you keep them in your environmental health and safety officer's office, or his desk, or his cube, or out in the administrative area where you keep your other records. Just make sure you know where they're at. Always make sure that you can demonstrate to the agency that you have a master list of MSDS sheets in the workplace where people use them. And then,
Are they SDS sheets?
well, they will, yes, I guess you could say, see? SD, right, you got till the 15th, right? Okay, but just have them there. They're gonna look for that, because that tells them they're communicating the hazards to the employees, and you have them accessible to the employees. A lot of times I go to places, the MSDS sheets, they have a little 3-ring binder like this, but they use many more chemicals. It's incomplete. Some of the MSDS sheets I've seen in there from the late 80s. You know, keep it up to date. Keep it going, okay? Another good way to prepare, and that the OSHA inspector likes to see, is posting a lockout tagout procedures. Does everybody know what those are? Basically, if you're going to work on a piece of equipment that could accidentally start up when you're working on it, you have to develop procedures to lock the electricity out, or to lock it in the off position, or yeah, okay? So a lot of times people don't know where those are at. They sit in some file and nobody's reviewed them. And I found that what the agency really likes is to have you post them on each piece of equipment, right on the PCL or the control unit. You know, and it's really effective. You laminate it, you post it right there. That basically answers a lot of the inspector's questions. They see that they're posted and they use them. And plus, it's a lot easier for your employees to understand what they are when they can basically access them when they're right there, okay? So there's just a few good tips on to know where your records are, okay? The inspector's coming. What do you need? Well, make sure you got something to take notes on. I've been one where everybody's just standing there and nobody's taking notes. You know, nobody's even thinking of taking notes, okay? It's simple. Take notes about what they said. Take bullet points. Identify what they've looked at. You know, what areas are they targeting? What are they talking about, you know? Like I said, have the camera. Keep one in the office. We have one, you know, that we keep right there. You know, many of my clients do too, okay? You can develop and use an inspection checklist. Very simple, you know. Do we have camera? Is the manager there? You know, check each box right down the line to make sure you're covered, kind of what we've been talking about, okay? And then give the inspector the personal protective equipment he needs to get into the facility. That shows him that you're taking it all seriously again, okay? A lot of times I like to hand them safety glasses, some earplugs if needed, you know, a uniform if required, you know, stuff like that, okay? Is there any questions on that? And a lot of this is very, like I said, very straightforward and commonsensical, okay? Here's what I recommend that you do. Basically, even though the inspector may want to go right into the plant, request an opening conference to meet and discuss what the options are and what he's there for, okay? Always escort the inspector. Do not let him go off on his own. That's another one. I've seen him wandering around while people are over here talking about something, okay? That just gives him more fuel for the fire, so to speak, okay? After everything's done, meet with him to identify some of the issues that he may have seen. What this does is it basically gives you the opportunity to address some of them before any types of citations or penalties are issued. And a lot of times you can address these and then they go away for them because they just want to see these addressed, okay? And then afterwards, he's gone out the door. Everybody should sit down and discuss what went down and why it went down and what do we think some of the issues that came up were. Okay, what is he gonna, or does the inspector have to tell you? Okay, you know, a lot of times that they neglect to tell you this information unless you ask it. Okay, so you know, why did you pick us? You know, they aren't going to volunteer that information. Sometimes they will, but most of the time I find that they don't. Okay, what's your purpose here? Okay, you know, what standards do you think apply to us? Are you here for electrical safety? Are you here for PPE? Is it the big overall inspection, okay? If it's an employee complaint, you want to get a copy of that complaint for review. Okay, so you can understand the basis of what it's coming from, because he may be looking at it from a different standpoint, and you really need to see what the exact complaint is, okay, with regards to that stuff.
Hey, Britt, when it comes to asking how they were selected and also for a copy of that complaint, is that something you can request and almost, I don't want to say demand, but prior to their facility walkthrough?
Yes, you can request it.
So within your right, is it within your right, though, to know before they walk into the actual facility?
That's kind of a tough one. I would ask it anyway.
Okay.
They can always refuse you.
Yeah. Or they can
Okay.
say they don't have it with them.
Right.
The other
You
thing
know?
is look at the scope of the inspection, how much are they supposed to do, so they don't go past what they're supposed to be into.
Right, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute, okay?
Brett, just one quick question. So, you know, you said earlier, you can't, you know, retaliate against somebody who's made the complaint. So if you ask the OSHA inspector for, if it's an employee complaint, are are they gonna give you the name of the employee, or are they gonna block that out?
No, they're not going to give you the name of the employee. They're going to give you, list specifically what the complaint was. Okay? Okay? Like I said, you got to ask them the questions, just like you had said. You know, why you here? Okay? Pretty straightforward, you know. We were talking about specific target areas, you know, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute, but you want to know, what is this? Is this a full-bore, full-scale inspection, or is this just focusing on a certain process line? A lot of times when there's an injury at the workplace and OSHA shows up, they just go directly to that process line where that injury occurred. Okay, and then they focus right on that area. You know, if it's the loss of a finger, for instance, they're going to go in there and focus on the machine guarding, interview the employees in that area about their training and all of that kind of stuff, but stick right within that area. You want to know what that is, okay? You have the right to know what it is. Okay, here's one I find happens more often than not. People get off target, okay? You got to make sure that it stays addressed on that specific complaint. OSHA's fishing too when they're out there a little bit, okay? And sometimes you really got to rein these guys in and bring them back to topic. If it's, like I said, for that piece of machinery there, because of a machine guarding issue, because of a loss of a finger, you focus on that, and you make sure it stays focused on that. Don't let them go in other areas. Here's another big trap I see all the time. Only answer the questions that's asked. A lot of people ramble. It's like maybe they're nervous or something, but they keep talking. I've actually had to kick people under the table to tell them, just be quiet, you know. There was one question they asked, you're done answering that question, then sit there and be quiet. You know what I find a lot of these inspectors will do? They'll just sit there and not say a word. And they try to get you to crack a little bit, and they try to get you, you know, and it works a lot of times, okay? But they try that. They try to, exactly, and you feel like,
What they're taught in training.
exactly. You feel like you got to fill in this space. Don't. Just sit. I've sat there for 15 minutes and not said a word. Okay. The other thing is, just be truthful and answer the questions briefly. Okay. I can't stress those last two enough. Okay. The rambling always gets you in trouble a lot of times. It just leads to a whole nother series of questions, a whole nother avenue for them to investigate. Okay. When you're doing the actual facility walkthrough, here's another one. Keep moving. Okay? I find a lot of times people stop and start discussing things. Well, that just gives the inspector time to sit and look around at other stuff. Okay? I always tell them, you know, you walk them in the front door, you walk through the facility and out the front door again before he even knows what happened. Okay? Keep walking. You can stop if he stops, but don't stop unless that inspector stops. Okay? Again, stay on topic. Don't do anything. Concise responses. Correct deficiencies immediately. If you're walking through there and he notices that you know, you have some unlabeled hazardous material containers, like this. Well, you know what? While he's there, go get those labels for those containers. Put them on. If he notices there's an extension cord that's a little frayed over there, while he's watching, get rid of that extension cord. Throw it in the garbage. Okay? If he sees, you know, somebody not wearing his PPE, walk over to that person, inform them they need to have your personal protective equipment on, and provide them the equipment right there. A lot of times those little violations, little nitpicky stuff they're going to get you for, will go away right there because they see you doing it. Okay? Now you're not going to, you know, even to the point where machine guards sometimes, where if it's a simple guard that was just taken off for something, the maintenance guy forgot to put it back on, just, if it's easy to put on, just put it on right there. A lot of times that mitigates that issue. Okay? Now, you know, there's some stuff you may not be able to correct, somebody in a confined space without a permit that's occurring there, you know, and stuff like that. But if it's the low-hanging fruit, fix it while he's there. Okay? You know, and that kind of goes with those personnel that you have participating in this inspection. Well, you know, somebody there, as say the document controller, can also act as somebody that when the guy notices a deficiency, he can go get the maintenance guy to come out and correct it. You know, he can kind of be the gopher for stuff like that. Take detailed notes. If he's looking at equipment piece A and he's looking at the guard over the rollers, you make notes that he's looking at this guard on this piece of equipment. You know, if he's looking at the lockout tagout procedure for that piece of equipment that you have posted on your unit, you write down he's looking at that procedure, okay? All right, closing conference. Well, who's going to attend? You may not need, after they've gotten all the documents that they wanted, you may not need the document control person you've assigned to this to attend that meeting. You may just want the manager, that the management position that you want to do that meeting, you know, okay? Like I always say, take comprehensive notes. Correct errors and misunderstandings. He may not have understood what you meant when you said you provided PPE training to production area personnel, but not the office personnel. You know, you may want to clarify which office personnel, where some of them may get that training, but you know, some of the staff that doesn't go into the production area may never go in there, so you may not provide certain types of training. So there's a trip hazard right there. I almost tripped over it right there, okay? But correct them while you're right there. I tell you, that goes a huge, long way with these guys, okay? It's telling you it takes it seriously, okay? Ask him what violations he saw and what he thinks he might issue, okay? That way, when you're doing the follow-up on the violation and you're meeting with OSHA and that kind of stuff, you can bring it to them and say, you know what, we already took care of it. Here it is. And you can mitigate a lot of the stuff right there, okay? Don't promise abatement dates. I've had a lot of people that say, we'll get that done in 2 weeks, and the HE follows up and asks if it's done, and it's not. Okay? The abatement dates are something that you can address during your informal conference when you meet with them a little bit. Okay? You can correct stuff, but don't commit to a certain date. Okay, I've seen a lot of people fall into that trap. Then it looks like you're not taking it seriously. And OSHA says, well, look, we told them 2 weeks. They haven't done it. Okay? So, you know, it's just what I've seen a lot of people do. They promise to do it within a week or something, and it doesn't get done. Okay? We just kind of talked about this. What was found? Did everybody cooperate? Do you have any other questions as the inspector that I can help answer and clarify before you leave right now? Okay? Write it down and don't argue. I've seen other instances where people start arguing with the guy in front of other people, and it does nobody any good, and it can make the inspector a little bit, you know, mad, and that doesn't do any good. Don't argue with them. You can discuss your points and make your points, but don't argue, okay? Afterwards, like I said, compare notes with everybody after the post-inspection debriefing, okay? Document and correct all the efficiencies. Maintain contact with OSHA if you can. You get the inspector's card, you got the number. That way, if there's certain things you want to put a positive face on, you can actually call him and say, hey, I want to let you know we corrected condition A. You know, and I'm going to send you some pictures on how we corrected it. And a lot of times you could, you know, avoid future meeting requirements with those guys, okay? I just find communication is the key with a lot of these agencies that I work with. Just make open communication. Okay? What's a bad inspection? Well, what I kind of started off with, first of all, make them wait a half an hour, don't let them in. Okay? Okay? When you show up and everybody's running, that inspector's standing there, everybody's running around trying to figure out who to contact, who's supposed to be involved in this, that doesn't send a good signal. Okay? It tells me that there's no organized OSHA program at this company. You know, they should know right away who it is. Okay? You know, you don't have a safety committee, you've done no training or just spotty training here and there, you know, when you come in there, okay? You have no records. I don't know how many places I go in and can't find any records anywhere, you know. You identify problems that need correction, and then you don't fix them, okay? This triggers all this stuff for them, okay? You got somebody coming to help you, you get this nice little bullet recommendation bullet list, and then you don't even address any of them. I get a lot of stuff where I come in, somebody hires me and pays me to help them, and then I give them the stuff, and then they don't do anything. Well, what'd you pay for it all already, you know? And just don't flaunt it. You know, I was at a place a few weeks ago where I walked in and they introduced me to the owner, and the first thing he said is all this environmental health and safety stuff's a bunch of BS. The first thing he said, they didn't even say hi to me. Okay, you know, so. All right, what are the violation types? Well, of course, you got the willful, and that's basically you knowing somebody could have got hurt, and you didn't do anything about it, and somebody got hurt. Okay? I mean, You know, believe it or not, it happens. There's companies out there that operate that way. Okay, you'd like not to think it, but they are. You know, and they can get you for 70 grand for one of these. Well, if it's bad enough, you know, death or an injury, okay? You know, the serious, basically, you know what, it's pretty probable, you know, that what you're doing could cause death, but they're, you know, they're going to mandatory hit you for $7,000. Or you should have known the hazard, you should have probably abated it. It's pretty serious, but nobody was actually injured, but it could happen very easily. You know, they're going to get you for it, okay? Then you have the other than serious, and, you know, that's just something, you know what? It's there. We've identified it, an electrical cord that's got exposed wiring. You should know that somebody could get electrocuted by that. You know, and it could kill somebody or it could not, you know. When I think you don't know that, but you should have addressed that. Okay, and then you get the repeated violations, and those are the ones that really come back and get you. Okay, because they got you for one, and then you didn't do anything, they got you for the same one again. That one right there, I can guarantee you're going to pay hefty for. Okay, you know, I was talking, this is a little off topic with somebody earlier, and when I get involved in these area meetings and this stuff, when I have to meet with OSHA and talk with them, a lot of people focus on the dollar amount and trying to get that dollar amount down, but that's not the key. The key is to negotiate getting these violation types reduced down.
Reduce the severity.
Okay, that's the key. Reduce that, because if it happens again or something, it gives you a little breathing room with this stuff. So when I go in there, and I always negotiate, well, you know, we've addressed this serious issue, you know, and this is what we've done. Could you reduce this to other than serious? And oftentimes they will if you've done it right. But that, and then that way, let's say it's a low-hanging for a lot of times is the electrical safety. They can come back and get you a lot of times for. You know, well, that way it gives you that, if they come back again and there's some other electrical issue that comes up, they can't hit you with a willful type of thing. And when you negotiate these violation types down, that automatically reduces the cost. So you're kind of doing what you want in the first place. Okay? So what can you know, what are some other things you do? Okay? Promote safety in the workplace. I find this is culture. You got to develop a culture of safety, okay? And that's through communicating to your employees what you want to do, clearly, okay? But also form a safety team. That tells your employees that you're taking it seriously. Have them participate in the safety team, okay? Conduct regular meetings. Pick topics of interest for your employees, okay? Let them participate. It's a big deal, and it works, okay? Post signs everywhere, you know, as they're walking into the production area, that safety comes first, okay? Your safety is important. You want to communicate that to them, okay? On your employee bulletin board, you know, you've got the OSHA Act posters. Well, put some safety signs up there. You know, safety topic of the month, you know, or something like that you want to discuss. I tell you, it works, and people feel better. Your employees feel better too, okay, when they think that's part of it, okay? Perform routine inspections. You know, a lot of times when I go out and help a plant, I don't go through and do these detailed inspections. I just initially start out and I walk through the plant and look at all the operations and just start flagging types of issues that I see that are easy correctable, easy to fix. You start getting used to doing that, then, you know, all this kind of falls into place. It becomes routine, becomes every day. Yes, ma'am.
How often should you do these audits, these OSHA audits? You know, just being on the safe side, you kind of know what the situation is before OSHA arrives.
Sure, I think that's on how your company operates. You know, you got to realize you're going to need time to correct stuff. You don't want to overload people with too many things to do. So, you know, you could decide you want to do them with the safety committee meetings on a monthly basis or quarterly, you know, or semi-annually. I think that's how it fits within your organization. Okay? Okay, like I said, employee, and then implement your safety program. A lot of times I see companies that got all these nice, fancy written programs, and when I open up the filing cabinet, it creaks open and it's dusty. You got to implement what you do. Okay, so you got to, you can talk the talk, but you also got to walk the walk. Okay, okay. Important part of documentation, and I'm going to try and, I know we're running a little late, is training sign-in sheets and certificates. Have them. The agency likes to see signatures on OSHA training, you know, or a certificate. If you got a training program and you hand it to them, there's no evidence that anybody was, or a matrix and stuff, that doesn't provide them evidence that these people were actually trained. Okay, so if you have actual sign-in sheets or certificates, it goes a long way. I see people hand them a big matrix that has all the training, the employee's name, and they say, well, how can I prove that you just didn't put an X there? Okay, and they've done that. Okay, have your written programs. Like I said, your written program should be something where you've kind of templated the front of the part, and your working document is the appendices, the employee list, the PPE stuff, so that you don't have to spend all your time updating OSHA programs. You can just replace appendices. Okay. Lockout Tagout's another one. I see, you know, who's your authorized employees? Everybody's kind of like, well, I know Joe does it, you know, and Bob does it, but there's no actual list. You need to have a list of who's actually authorized to perform lockout tagout on equipment. They will ask you for that list. Okay? Hazard assessment forms, that's what you had said, David, is basically you're required to perform hazard assessments on your operations, you know, so you have, if these were all process lines, you'd focus on one right here and you'd start assessing the hazard. Is there pinch points? Is there exposure to hazardous chemicals? You know, and there's a simple checklist that you can get online or anything to kind of run through it. But they're going to say, do you have your hazardous assessments? Or how'd you determine that he needed eye protection? Or this guy had to have steel-toed shoes for him to do this? You know, they want to see that documentation, okay? And they're also going to check for, when I said like respirators, fit testing, okay? Your respirator checks, your exposure records, the indoor air quality, noise monitoring. You know, I always recommend to people that if you're using hazardous materials, at least get some indoor air quality done, okay, where that person's working right there, just to make sure. It's only going to help you and show that you've assessed it. If you have nothing and the agency comes in for a complaint, you've got nothing to back up your claim. Okay, same with the noise sampling. Okay, we kind of talked about it. Use a basic checklist. Don't overcomplicate this stuff. Okay, you can get lost through all the details. Don't get lost in the details, okay? Okay? Make sure you have your PPE available. This is the entrance to the production area. You have your earplugs, your safety glasses, right here. Okay? Don't make them go through somewhere to get them or have a difficulty to get them, okay? Keep it in stock. I know times I've gone to places where they have those, but they're empty. I mean, a lot. You know, you get busy. You're producing your widgets. You're producing this product, and you know some of this stuff slips by the wayside. But when you get in these practice of kind of looking at it from a safety perspective, you'll just notice walking through, oh, those are gone. I got to go get some more. Okay, okay. Develop and maintain your programs, like I said. All right. They're not as complicated as you think. A lot of times, they're basic templates in the front, and you modify your appendices, like I said. Okay. We talked about all that good stuff. Key points to remember: promote the safety. Okay, I find better and happier employees, better retention, just by promoting that. Okay. Provide your workplace free of hazards. Easier said than done, I know, but once you get in the safety culture, this stuff kind of comes hand in hand. You start looking at it from that perspective. Okay. Keep it clean and organized. I can't stress that enough. You got aisle spacing, everything's where it's supposed to be. That also reduces potential for employee injuries. Okay? I can't stress the importance of the record keeping, like I've talked about. That's low-hanging fruit for them if you don't know where it's at. All right? Develop your procedures for the inspection. Is there any questions or anything? It's a lot straightforward, commonsensical. Oh.
So, understanding it's just a bit of a negotiation when the inspection happens, and it sounds like the penalty amounts are a little bit arbitrary. What can you do as an employer to challenge the ruling?
Just what you said, you can challenge what he says, and just make sure you have evidence and the facts to support what you're challenging. You know, so you, pictures, documentation that shows it. Okay, you got to be able to follow up what you're saying.
So if they say, okay, you had a bottle that didn't have a label on it, I'm going to assess the penalty at $15,000. What can you do to, I mean, besides negotiating with the actual inspector, is there anything you can do to sort of run that up the food chain and say, this is excessive, what are my rights?
Well, here's what, you know, I was talking to somebody else about this. You know, a lot of times when you have the initial meeting with OSHA, kind of like the free meeting that they offer you, a lot of times I recommend that you don't have legal counsel with you. Because when you do that, it starts confrontational right away. Okay, they're going to have your lawyers here, next thing you know, our lawyer's involved. Nothing personal, okay? So then you kind of feel them out and discuss it. And at that time, if you're dealing with something like that, that's when you bring the lawyer in and it starts a negotiating phase.
There's a formal contest process. Once they issue you a citation, you've got 15 days to contest it. You can have an informal
Is that all
hearing,
right?
you can go into a formal hearing, you can take it as far as the Supreme Court if you want to.
Right, but you know
It's all
what?
there.
I would say stick up for what you believe in, you know, and just make sure that you can back up what you're saying, you know, and if it's unreasonable, that's where you do get in the legal sides about negotiating fines and penalties with them. You know, a lot of times, like I said, I have that informal meeting at the start, and, you know, I can literally say this honestly, that 90% of the time I've been able to automatically reduce the penalty by at least 51%.
They're very
Just-
workable to talk to and to try to deal with. Everybody gives them a bad rap. Sit there and be honest with them and try to negotiate and see what they'll do.
Is there anything else that, common sense and preparation?
Well, and again, from our perspective, first off, thank you. Yep.
Thank you.